Welcome to another edition of Citizen Watch on this beautiful Tuesday here in downtown Merced. And we have quite a treat on the agenda today, don't we, Case?
Yes, we do. We have in studio Roger Wood. He's a familiar voice on the powerhouse of Merced, KYOS there. He has community conversations and some other shows I believe he does. And I don't. What else do you do, Raj?
Well, it's called Community Conversations. That's the main thing. And once in a while I do a PSA or something, but you're the heavy hitter.
Oh, no. We're just a little 2-bit radio station over there that tries to get
You like that 2-bit, huh?
Yeah, I think it's worth 50 cents now. You guys have kicked things up, I think.
Well, I would like to take this opportunity to let people know that we are on YouTube. If you type in the YouTube search engine, Citizen Watch with Casey Steed or with Robert Tomasetti or with Steve Colvard, any one of the three of us, you'll come up to our shows. I think we have 6 or 8 shows on YouTube. We've got a combined approaching over 300 hits. So I don't know if all of our family members are watching over and over, but I'd like to think
you can count on a few for me, I'm sure.
I went there yesterday, but I'm not good at YouTube, and it took me a bit to find it. I found when I put Citizen Watch, I got a bunch of wristwatch things.
Yep, Citizen wristwatch.
Does make a heck of a watch, and of course, Robert, he's a collector of watches. But the other way to find us, if you put in KYOS space 1480 AM, that'll bring up our programs as well as Roger's programs. There's a lot of community conversations that are evidently been downloaded there, so that's a good thing.
All
Absolutely.
Right.
And we have Tim O'Neill. And Tim, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm just a local community member. Been in the community since '88. I think the reason I'm here today is because Roger saw my guest editorial in the Sun Star on the Merced Union High School district, and wanted to chat a little bit more about that.
Yep.
Well, you're more than just a community member. You sat on the Merced High School board, didn't you?
I did. I spent 4 years on the McSwain School Board and then another 6+ years on the Merced Union High School District Board.
So we got some experience here, Case. We've got some experience here.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons you wanted to come in is we saw an editorial that you had written January 6th in the Merced Sun Star, and it said, school boards should let the superintendent do his job. And I'm just going to read a couple of things to get us started here. It says, unfortunately, the civility is gone, and certain members of the board have worked to hamstring our superintendent, second-guessing his personnel decisions and micromanaging the district. These members seem to forget that their jobs are important, but limited. A well-functioning board knows that their job is to set policy, approve the budget, and approve labor contracts. Well-informed board members understand that they are responsible for hiring, evaluating, and holding accountable one employee, and that employee is the superintendent. I'm not sure why David Honey, Sam Spangler, and William Snyder think that they have more insight into the day-to-day operations of the district than the superintendent that the two of them help hire. But a trio of part-timers trying to do the superintendent's job by committee is a recipe for chasing away the very best top administrators responsible for supporting our teachers in the success that the district has enjoyed to date. Now, you probably heard Tim, Robert, and I take probably a different take on what the school board should do, and I think it would be fair to say that you were instrumental in bringing V. Scott Scambray to the district.
Actually, Dave Honey and I were both on the board when Scott was hired, and unfortunately, I don't have the benefit of knowing what you and Robert have talked about in the past, so you're going to have to fill me in on that.
Uh-oh.
I think it was more of
we feel the school board's responsibility is to make hiring and personnel decisions over and above just the superintendent. I mean, why have a board?
Well, that's a common misconception, Casey. And I happened to hear a little bit of your program the other day, and we were comparing it to city council, and I think that's a very valid comparison, in that the relationship between the city council and the city manager is a similar relationship to between the superintendent and the school board. And this, and the hard part for people to understand is that you hire that superintendent, and then it's his job to put together his team and his principals, and he can run them by the school board. Is that fair to say, Tim? But the school board really shouldn't say, well, I don't like Robert Tomasetti, so I don't want him to be whatever,
Yeah, and there's a difference between what a school board legally can do and what a well-functioning school board should do. Does the school board have the authority to stop one of the superintendent's appointments, absolutely. The school board is responsible for blessing all personnel decisions, but a well-functioning school board doesn't get into the micromanagement. I mean, I think I was a pretty good school board member, but I didn't know enough to run the district. That's why we hire Scott. That's why he hires his top people. You've got to have some trust there. You need to have some checks and balances in place. You need to have a good evaluation system. The school board sets policies, sets the budget, hires the superintendent.
But what if they disagree? In other words, and I agree with you guys, superintendent should have what the say in the day-to-day operations of the school board. But say, Roger, for example, you're the school board, and Scott, excuse me, and Tim is the superintendent, and Tim hires me. And you really think that, okay, maybe Tim hired me because I'm great at retirements. But maybe you think I'm abrasive, or maybe you think I'm a loose cannon and not a good fit within the school district. Now, isn't it your right to go to, and your responsibility to go to Tim and say, Tim, as the superintendent, I think you need to look at this?
I think it's certainly your responsibility to let the superintendent know what you feel, but it is not your responsibility to override his decision. And if he does things that, as a school board, you don't like, the school board always has the authority to hire as well as to terminate the superintendent. And that's where things come together.
It sounds to me like we've had a specific situation where that has in fact been the case. Did something like that actually come before the school board where the superintendent wanted to hire somebody and 3/5 of the school board overrode it?
It was one of the deals. It was a lady named Ms. Quesadillas, I believe, correct?
Yes, that's one example, and I have to say, I have not kept up, with all the goings on. I mean, I left the school board to work on my business. That's what I'm doing, but I do, still have, friends and contacts, with teachers and with administrators and other school board members, and the one that you're speaking of, Casey, is Tammy Quesadillas, who was Scott wanted to appoint as assistant superintendent. The 3/5 of the board said that let's just make her interim superintendent, and again, that's within their authority. But I don't feel like that's the best way to run a school district. Certainly wasn't what I learned when I went through the CSBA Masters in Governance classes, of which a couple of the school board members that are there now have gone through. And California School Boards Association is the professional association of all the school boards in California, and Roger even brought some of their materials with them. And they have a whole program designed around how do boards and superintendents work best together to do what's necessary to do what's right for the kids. And one of the key points of that is that the board doesn't micromanage the superintendent. I mean, when I was on the board, Scott made some personnel decisions that I wondered about, but he's my superintendent. He's responsible. He's the guy. I'm in my own business. I'm not going to go to my production manager and question the guy he decided to hire to run the screen print press. That's not why I hired him.
But what if you know that individual personally that he hired, and you just know his character, and you know it's not somebody that you want in your company?
Or there's history.
Or there's history. I mean, would there be any extenuating circumstances that might prompt you to go talk to your personnel manager and say, look, I know this guy, and I just don't, I think you're making a big mistake here? Because ultimately the buck stops with you, correct?
Absolutely. We're certainly going to have that conversation, but I've got to believe that my operations guy is going to do his due diligence. And now, obviously, hiring a pressman isn't quite the same as hiring an assistant superintendent. But again, I've got to hold my guys accountable, and that's the way I thought about it with Scott when I was on the board. Is that okay? Well, he's probably got his reasons for this, and if it doesn't work, he's the one that's accountable for that, not that individual.
Yeah, but you're the one that's. But you're the one.
To preface something, I don't mean to interrupt, Robert. We can probably all agree that we may not agree after this conversation, but at least there are two divergent points. Go ahead, Rob.
The point is when you have personnel issues, from what I know about the school board, is they're addressed in closed session. So if you've got a school board that doesn't, okay, let's look at it this way. Mrs. McAfee was approved 5-0. Tammy Quesadillas was given a 2-2-1. So with that vote, there has to be something there that makes her not a good fit for the Merced Union High School District. And just because Scott likes her, or Mr. Scambray likes her, doesn't necessarily mean that she should be in that position. It says in the Educational Encyclopedia that the school board has the ultimate responsibility on crucial decisions regarding the district's top-level leadership and key staff. So if I'm a school board and I'm supposed to look at the key staff and this person rubs people the wrong way, is not a good fit, it's going to be in closed door session. Nobody's ever going to know about it, just like Mrs. Hennis in Atwater School Board. Nobody knew why she was terminated. Nobody knew why she came back. Nobody knew why she left again. Nobody will ever know that because it's confidential. So, we're just supposing that Scott Scambray's viewpoint of Tammy Quesadillas is the correct one when the board obviously feels otherwise. And the board is ultimately responsible for the running of the school district.
Anybody?
Well, Robert, if you think that Scott makes his hiring decisions, or if the board thinks that that Scott makes his hiring decisions based on who he likes, then I think
really,
that's what you just said.
Well, how did he get Leonard Kahn? Leonard Kahn is a buddy from back in another school district. Leonard Kahn is now the CBO at the Merced Union High School District, who is friends with Scott Scambray. Okay, now they came together as a team. Now, how did that happen?
I mean, I think it's like pro sports. You know who the good players are, and if you could recruit them, you recruit them.
Right, and you also put people in the locker room that you like and that you know is going to have the same ideas that you do. The point I'm just saying is that you've got a school board that has voted that Mrs. Quesadillas does not have a vote of confidence from them. Scott thought otherwise. Mr. Scambray thought otherwise. This is why you have a 2-2-1 vote. But Stacey McAfee was installed at 5-0. So I mean, there's possibly something there from Mrs. Quesadilla's past or how she comes across or how she does her job that somebody doesn't appreciate.
The real issue is that if the superintendent who is responsible for running that school district feels that she's the right person, as a school board, you really should go with him and then see, okay, if you make a mistake, and if you make a mistake, the person that's responsible is the superintendent. It's not the school board, it's the superintendent that the school board will hold responsible if in this case, Mrs. Quesadillas or anyone else fails to do a good job. Okay.
Well, isn't that what they did, Real Roger? They put her in interim, check her out, see how she does, and then when it went for permanency, it was a 2-2-1 vote. So they had time to evaluate her. They had time for her in the saddle, and for some strange reason, we don't know and we'll never know, is they decided that she wasn't a good fit.
Okay, now my question to you would be is how would I as a school board member be able to form a really decent opinion about a lady who works in the district office's performance?
That's exactly the point. I mean, none of the school board members, myself included when I was there, has the domain expertise to make those kind of decisions. We need to. That's why we hire a superintendent. If you talk to anybody at the California School Boards Association, they'll tell you fully functioning districts the board doesn't micromanage their staff.
No, and you're absolutely correct, Tim, if you have a fully functioning board and if you have a fully functioning school district. But evidently there's a rift in this one. You've got a lady on the school, you got one lady who is pro CTA, okay, and you got other people that aren't so. From what I understand for the Merced Union High School District, they have $16.8 million in reserve. There's some people in the school board that think that they should shore up more money and hold it in reserve. And there's some people that say, hey, you got $60 million, let's spend it. And the first thing we want is pay raises.
And whose decision would that fall to? If there is a surplus in the school district, does that fall to you guys to budget that out as a school board member, or is it, again, that in the hands of the superintendent?
It's the government. What CSBA calls it is the governance team, right? The governance team is the 5 school board members and the superintendent working together. So in the case of something that that no board has had to deal with over the last 5 years, the potential for pay raises. But I was on the board back in the day when there was state money, and we were negotiating with the unions for fair pay raises, and those boards would consult with the superintendent, give the direction to the superintendent. That's all done in closed session, and then you have a negotiation team, usually not including the superintendents. Usually, one of the assistant superintendents and some of the top administrators, some of the top union folks. They go with their direction. When the union gets the same kind of direction from their leadership, and they negotiate, and ultimately, whatever they negotiate has to be agreed to by the school board, by a majority vote, and by the teachers union.
Okay. Well, it's time for our first break here, folks. We're going to take a quick commercial break. You're listening to Citizen Watch here on this beautiful Tuesday evening in downtown Merced. We have in-studio guest today, Mr. Roger Wood from A-Town, and Tim O'Neill, a local business owner here. And we're talking school boards and teachers.
Former school board member, remember that.
Yeah, exactly.
Give the man his kudos.
Absolutely. But hang with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Citizen Watch on this beautiful Tuesday evening here in Merced, California. We have in studio today Mr. Roger Wood and Tim O'Neill, joining none other than Robert Tomasetti, Casey Steed, and myself. And we're talking school district issues. And in the first segment, we were talking about kind of the interactions between the superintendent and the school boards, and maybe a couple different philosophies on what those roles and those interactions should be. But another issue that we had come up was the El Capitan High School and the building of El Capitan High School, and a perceived, and again, I don't know a whole lot about this, and thankfully we've got a couple people in here that are well versed on it, but my understanding is there was some cost overruns involved with El Capitan from the original estimate, and in order to compensate for that the excess cost that was unforeseen, that the school district went in and took some money that was earmarked for a new gymnasium at Merced High School and a new gymnasium at Atwater High School, and diverted that money to complete El Capitan High School. Am I right? Is the backstory correct there? Can you kind of fill us in, Tim? Because I know you were around during all that time.
Yeah, that is actually not correct.
Okay, perfect.
Now, so
I knew there was a reason we had you in, Jim.
So a few years ago, the voters passed Measure M, which was and forgive me because I will get some numbers wrong, but they'll all be in the ballpark. It was a $140 million bond project to do a whole bunch of different projects, including building a new high school for Merced, which turned out to be El Cap, major expansion at Livingston High School, new gyms for Atwater and Merced, a new high school wing for Merced, a
swimming
new
pools.
Classroom, swimming pools at
Golden Valley and Buhack, I believe.
Right. And so, and that's when the economy was rocking and rolling, and with bond measures, what you can bond and what you can spend is based on the projections of what your property values are, right? So at the time when we went into it, we anticipated being able to do all those projects in a reasonably short period of time.
Based on the $140 million, which would be based on the property values that you assessed at the time that you made the bond offer.
So what the voters agreed to was allowing us to borrow up to $140 million. That $140 million has to be collateralized for the bondholders, and it's done by an income stream off of the property taxes.
And a percentage of your assessed valuation is the limit you can reach, okay?
Right.
And it's a different percentage when you pass it at 55% versus passing it 2/3. There's a little higher percentage if you get a 2/3 vote, if I understand right, on how bond issues work. Yeah.
But the real crux of the matter was that we were in planning phases for all of those projects. Well, then when the economy tanked and property values started going down, we still had authorization to borrow $140 million, but we didn't have the assessed valuation to borrow all of that. So
where'd that put us at? How much did we have after the 140? I know you can't specifically.
I can't.
You're looking at 100 million, 120 million. I mean, how far did that knock us down?
I heard from Leonard Kahn when we had our conversation that it was about half.
About half.
Yeah,
instead of 140,
and what he said
million.
was exactly what Tim had said, is that there was a downturn. And when I asked him about it and pressed him for it, he said, well, nobody saw it coming. And that's when I said, hey, I went to the seminar at Franklin Templeton, and when they told me that they were not going to do California state tax freeze in the Central Valley, you knew that the handwriting was on the wall, that you were not going to get money for the Central Valley.
Okay, but for the sake of the conversation, we had a $140 million target. We got much less than that.
Yeah.
But Robert says maybe half, maybe a little more, but we don't know exactly the number on that. But now you're dealing with a different size pie.
Now, we got more than half, though.
Well
but
more.
We didn't get the 140.
Yeah, but the point.
Roger, do you know how much we got?
No, but I know one thing, that El Cap was a big chunk and Livingston was a big chunk, and those together might have added over $100 million. So we got over $100 million, but we didn't get the 140.
Okay, now, real quick question. When you issue the bond, do you specifically have to say what the money's earmarked for?
Not when you issue the bond, but when you pass the bond measure. So in Measure M, what the citizens of the area voted for specifically had the list of projects, including the El Capitan High and the gymnasiums.
Right.
What people have to understand is that those gyms will get built. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And actually, with the rebound in residential property values, that's going to come faster rather than slower. And the reason for that is because when the economy went in the tank and property values went down, the county assessor reduced all of our residential and commercial property tax. I mean, I know that my assessed valuation on my commercial building and on my home both went down. So what's happening now as the property values go back up is it's going up faster. So it's whereas before when you're whatever my Prop 13 limit was, you could only go up 1% a year, right? Now it can go up more than 1% a year until I hit my Prop 13 limit, and then it'll start going back up 1% a year. So there'll be a quicker return.
And will there have to be an additional vote by the citizens to reissue another bond,
No.
or you still have room there to borrow against in order to fulfill that $140 million bond originally?
That is exactly it. So the authorization is still there. It's just that when property values went down, we weren't able to borrow. The district was not able to borrow the money that they had anticipated as soon as they would like to.
So then at that point, you have to prioritize how you're going to spend that chunk of money, correct?
Right. And the big reason that there are a whole bunch of reasons that El Cap was, in my mind, a much more important project to do sooner rather than later. And the biggest one of those was, I think it was about $38 million of state matching funds that we would have just had to turn back to the state of California if we decided, no, we're not going to build this.
And that $38 million is on top of the bond issuance?
Exactly.
Well,
Yeah.
so we had if we got $90 million on the bond issue and then $38 million from the state, so now you're looking at $140 million, right? Or close to.
But the 140 doesn't have anything to do with state aid. State aid helps you on that, and the reason you get state aid is you have bonding capacity because most of the time you've got to do some sort of a match
whatever
for
we
it.
collected from the bond issue, the state gave us another $39 million.
That was over and above, and they probably gave us money maybe for Livingston too. I don't know for sure.
Yeah, and that 38 might include Livingston.
What year was the bond issue approved?
It was like 07 or 08, somewhere back in there, right before things went in the trash can.
Now we're 7 years later.
Right.
And the problem with El Capitan is overruns, budgeting problems. We didn't have enough property. We had to go buy 15 more acres. We had a bunch of little issues. Okay, now you're going to tell me that we have $50 million to build 2 high school gyms.
Oh, I don't know how much is left out of the 140, but there is enough.
First of all, would you agree that there were some cost overruns, some unexpected expenses at El Capitan?
Oh, I have no idea on that from Roger's point of view.
Yeah, you know what? I wasn't on the board. I went off the board once that decision was made.
Do you know what the original price tag was for El Capitan?
It was somewhere. It was a big range for a long time. It started out one place, and even in the design phase, we're not talking cost overruns after you issue the contract, but then it went up, and then when the economy went down, it started dialing back. We actually built the school at probably the very best time in terms of what it cost. The cost to build it. One of the estimates I heard was that we probably saved $20 million to build it in the depths of the recession.
But on the bond issuance, do you have to specify how much money is going to each project?
I don't recall that.
I don't think so.
See, here's my question. We got $50 million left. Now what's going to happen is the school system's going to go back to the public and say, guess what? You know those gyms that we were going to put in? Well, now that was 7 years ago. This is 14 years later, and oh my God, we're going to need another $20 million to finish this project. And the point of the matter is this is what the school systems constantly do. They go to the public trough over and over and over when they don't manage it properly. That bond issue that I voted for, that I paid for.
And what can you give me specifically where you think they managed it improperly?
Really?
Well, the point of the matter, first of all, is they curved the school. They didn't have to curve a school. Okay, I was told that engineering specifics, that's $1 million just to curve the school. They said that they were going to let people locally bid on the projects because it would keep the cost down. We didn't have anybody locally. Garth Pecanino's group wasn't even allowed to bid on the project. Okay, Opinski's got problems with the project. 15 acres short on the project. Okay, then you go and you say, well, the reason we got this bond issue is because we're going to, look, I'm living in Atwater. I don't care about El Capitan High School. I want Measure M because you told me I was going to get new stuff on my high school. And then all of a sudden, I'm standing there.
First off, does any of this ring true to you, Tim? Were we 15 acres short on the building of the school?
If we were, that's the first time I've ever heard it. I was on the board when we finalized the deal for that piece of property, and it was
he was fine. Gone after all of the.
How about local bidding for contractors?
Okay, that's where he's really wrong. Okay, so now
how?
I'll tell you.
You're going to hear. Go ahead.
Okay. The contract that was let with the general contractor on that specified that at least 50% of the labor, materials, and subcontractors had to be done with local folks. Same thing in Livingston. And those numbers were met. And that put a lot of people, should have a few of them on the program, but people who had no job during the recession, other than if it weren't for the fact that those projects were being built.
We should, because contractors told me, and Greg Opinski's one of them, is having an issue. I don't know what the issue's about, but I was told by contractors, small contractors, I wasn't allowed to hammer a nail in there.
Right.
And you're like, really?
This is an area again where we're going to have to agree to disagree.
Yeah. Ask Greg, what the contract was that he got for Livingston High School. He was the general contractor for Livingston High School, so I don't really know what he's complaining about.
And here's another issue I think that you were trying to get out too, Robert. Let me see if we have enough time here. Yeah. If I'm understanding this correctly, you issued the bond and you had some projects underneath that bond, and you didn't get the money and you were expecting, so you had to prioritize, and you've got some things that are still on that original list. Right. Now, I think what Robert is saying is so theoretically, the projects that were on that original bond issuance should be handled underneath that umbrella, if you will, and it shouldn't be necessary to ask the taxpayer for more money through a bond float for projects that were already assigned to the previous bond. Am I saying that correctly, Robert?
Well, my question is this: if you build a gym and your calculations for a gym in 2007 were $10 million, what do you think it's going to be in 2018 or 2017? It's going to be far more than that. And the problem is that we are going to run out of money, because I don't think that the difference is going to build 2 gyms and swimming pools and all that.
Would you agree with that?
Well, I
don't know where you would get that opinion.
I know in talk radio you're supposed to be controversial, right?
No, I don't.
But to start complaining about problems that haven't even happened yet, Robert. Seriously?
Really? That's our problem. I'm reading a newspaper about Proposition 30, and we were told, oh my God, it's the death knell of the school system. Guy comes out today and says that was garbage. The school system constantly goes back to, and it says it right here, that they go to the school system because it's by far the most popular category of state spending. So when you go to the kids and you go, oh, guess what? We got $30 million left, because I was told that El Capitan cost $98 million turnkey. Okay, turnkey. That means $98 million went to El Capitan High School. Now, I'm looking at...
Do you agree with that figure, Tim?
That sounds about right.
Yeah. So I'm $98 million. Okay, did we do anything at Livingston High School to chip in that $140 million?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Major.
You can't believe what they did at Livingston.
And how much was Livingston's price tag, do you know? Roughly.
Because they got state matching as well.
I don't remember the number. But
how much out of the bond issuance did we have to use for...
They got a new gym. They got a big recreation area. They got
$20 million, $30 million?
Several new classrooms, a beautiful new classroom building.
So if you're from Atwater or Merced High School and you're going, oh, ton of money went over there, ton of money went over here, and by the time I graduate high school, I'm never going to see a gym.
Well,
and maybe Tim's right. But what I'm worried about is this is what we do. This is what happens with everything. It's bid cheap, ask Casey. And then there's huge overruns that cost more and more and more money.
Okay, see, you're wrong. You're wrong again. Okay, so so on El Capitan, it was what do they call it? A lease back bid. We had a guaranteed price from the contractor on that. They weren't allowed to do overruns. There was a contingency in there that the school district and the contractor agreed to, but any overruns beyond that were on the contractor.
Okay, so the 15 acres that El Capitan got hosed on, the 15 acres that was adjacent to it that they bought, that they paid at a premium, that's not in the contract.
Do you know anything about that? Is this the first you're hearing of this?
That's the first I've heard of it.
See, Robert, so that may not even be the right information. What I do remember is at one time they had picked a site, and they had to change the site because of a floodplain issue or something?
So that is this same site, and what happened is that the feds changed the rules, and it was now in a floodplain. So basically, what we had to do is build up the site, so the site, where the building is now, is higher than it was originally.
Drain properly.
Yeah, it's because of Haystack Reservoir. Which
that's interesting.
Gotcha. Well, hold your thought there, Robert, because it's time to take our second commercial break. You're listening to Citizen Watch here on this beautiful Tuesday evening, right here at 1480 KYOS. In studio today, Roger Wood, Tim O'Neill. What is your name again?
I'm here.
Robert Tomasetti.
Yeah. Don't forget Casey. He was quiet that whole segment.
On the phone with Casey. Yeah, it's good stuff though, isn't it, Casey? Good radio, huh?
Hey, this is what we live for.
Stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back. We're back. Bring us home, Case. Bring us back, Case.
Hey, welcome back to our final segment of Citizen Watch here on a beautiful Tuesday night, the 21st of January. Appreciate everybody listening to us here. Again, I would encourage people, if you can't catch the show live, to go on YouTube. You can hear all the replays. In studio, we have Tim O'Neill, former school superintendent from 2004, 2011.
No, Merced High School District board member, not superintendent.
You're promoting somebody here.
Yeah, don't give me that job, Casey.
Man, if he was a superintendent, he'd give up his day job.
Robert, Steve Colvard, Roger Wood, and we've also been joined at our last segment by Steve Gomes, Merced County Office of Education. Dr. Gomes, thanks for stopping in. I just wanted to read one thing that Tim O'Neill wrote in his editorial on January 4th. It says, "We have an election coming up next year, and our citizens deserve to know whether their board members are advancing or obstructing the progress that we need to make to continue to improve education outcomes for our high school students." And I think why we have this program today is because we take a little bit different view of Mr. O'Neill on what a board does, what a school board does. I feel that the school board members have expertise, and this is why the voters elected them. And they are a governing board. We're a non-merit school district as opposed to a merit district. And the board has the responsibility to make these personnel decisions in accordance with the superintendent, of course. And when there's a disagreement, what other recourse do you have? Now, I think that, as Mr. O'Neill said, there is an election coming up this year. Also, Mr. Scambray's contract is coming up this year. I believe in June it will either be renewed or not. And so I know that the way that you evaluate performance is what has happened. And obviously the board is divided for a reason. Unfortunately, we don't know all the reasons because a lot of this is in closed session. So we have to kind of ferret this out the best we have. And all we can look is past performance. Mr. Scambray came from a school district, Val Verde Unified School District down in Southern California. They had some problems with spending money on building gymnasiums and that sort of thing with state funds. And he came to our school district and brought in a gentleman named Leonard Casey Kahn. Now, there's a Leonard Casey Kahn that lost his securities license for bilking some little old ladies out of their incomes. We've asked Leonard Casey Kahn if it's the same person. He says it's not. So, again, we can only go by what we know, and we're not trying to make any false accusations, or we're just trying to get to the bottom of this to find out why these three school board members are disappointed in the way the direction is going.
And we never will, though, will we? I mean,
No.
that is a closed session thing. Would you agree with that, Tim? I mean, that's all. Those personnel decisions are all done behind closed doors, and that's not for the public ear.
That's correct.
Is that correct to say? And is it also correct to say that we just have two contrasting philosophies on the role of the Board of Education? I mean, we're going to have to agree to disagree on what the role is.
Yep.
Tim and Roger thinks that you task the superintendent with your what term did you use? Your not principles, your
Staff.
Policies,
exactly. With a policy and what you want to get accomplished, and then you don't micromanage him. You give him the freedom to hire who he wants and to kind of work within the confines to get the job accomplished that you've assigned him to do.
And there's a reason for that. And the reason is because you need a good superintendent to run a school district. You know, a board cannot run a school district without a really good superintendent. And if you have a board that's micromanaging the superintendent, you're never going to get good superintendent. If you look at, I know we're going to talk about academic performance. If you look at the numbers for Merced Union High School District since Scott Scambray was hired, it's a completely upward trend. I've got the numbers sitting in front of me. When he came on board, our numbers for API scores were anywhere from, let's say for the whole district it was 678. We are now at 779. So, and we've gone from a place where, we as a district we were on 790. What's that? 793. 793. And we've gone, one of the important rankings, when you're in an area like ours, is similar school rankings. I mean, we can look at how we stack up against all schools statewide, regardless of their socioeconomics, and we stack up fairly well in the 70 to 80 percentile range there. But if you look at other districts like us, of the same kind of socioeconomics that we have in Merced County, our high schools are almost all 10s, 10 out of 10. We weren't there in 2007 when Scott came on board. We had Livingston was a 10. Livingston's always been a star performer for that, but you can't argue with the academic performance. I think
Well, you can though, Tim.
Well, let me put something in on this. Let me put something in on this for a second. One of the issues I think is that we that live here don't appreciate what some other school districts have. And I have a relative who teaches at Folsom Elementary School. And I asked this lady one day, I said, how many free lunch children do you have in your school? And she gives me a blank look. And I said, well, how about in your class? And she says,
3.
Maybe 1 in her class. And she said, I think we might have 6 in the school. And that's like a 600, normal kind of K through 6 school. And so they're looking at maybe 6 out of 600. I don't even know what percent that is. What's that? That's 1/10 of 1%, I think. And I think we're looking at, I know Atwater Elementary, I recall, was well over 50%. It was in the 60s, if I remember right. I don't know the numbers for sure.
And what's the point?
The point is that you're working with a way different population in Folsom than you are in Merced County, whether you look at the high school or look at other schools or look at Atwater Elementary. And so the similar schools ranking is, I think, an important thing to look at, because the similar school ranking deals with, do you have a lot of non-English speakers? Do you have poor people? I don't know what else.
Well, I got a question
that
for you.
kind of stuff,
Then what would you address, or how would you say that Modesto High School, which is the worst high school in Modesto, it was the cheapest made, it's schlock, it had no air conditioning until 15 years ago, sits in the worst section of town, it's got socioeconomic of Laotian, Mexican, black, poor, everything you have. And yet, Modesto High School is always number 1 in academics in Modesto. Johansson was a $60 million monument to Peter Johansson. Enoch's, all of these schools can't compete with that school. And yet, that school's socioeconomic is the worst in Modesto, and it's number 1.
But let's talk about, we don't really care about Modesto.
Well, we don't care about Folsom.
What I'm just explaining to you, there's a heck of a difference between a school that has a really affluent population and Modesto, and you talking about Modesto. Let's look at Merced High School District, because we got the numbers right here for you to listen to.
Well, I'd like to weigh in on this as Steve Gomes, County Superintendent, and just happened to drop by because I like the coffee here. And
and we like you, Steve.
But it's interesting that you brought this up, because there's just a new study just been put out by West Ed, which is the leading educational research institute in California, closely tied to University of California, Berkeley. And I can tell you that there's a lot of stuff they put out that I don't really buy. But one of the things that they've just completed is a study, is because they looked at Modesto, for example, but I can tell you why Modesto's high is because they got the baccalaureate program over there. They have some of the top academic students in Modesto attending that high school.
Yep.
And so that skews everything. That skews everything right away.
No. But what I'm saying, Steve, is when we use socioeconomic as a indicator or as a measuring stick,
you say predictor. It's the best predictor of student academic performance.
Predictor, but Modesto blows it all out of whack.
Yes,
and so I'm saying
so does Sanger, and so does Planada.
And what I'm saying is why can't we get that at Merced High School?
We have it at Merced High School.
Oh, why? Because the scores are higher?
As measured by the state, as measured by the
No Child Left Behind.
No, actually, this is state testing. Mm-hmm. This is as measured by the state mandated tests. Now, one of the things I'll be talking about in our report on our schools this coming February 27th is that talking about how we are transitioning. We will no longer be using the academic performance index as it is now. This score relies heavily, the high school score relies heavily on the passing percentage of the high school exit exam. Probably not a good measure. And
Whoa, stop. There you go. This is my point. You're saying that API, that high school exit exam, is probably not a good measure. But then what I'm told is, oh, look at these scores over here that we got. Oh, how great they are.
But it's a system that we have, and it's a system that we're measured by. And so,
but I understand that,
Robert,
Steve.
you talk about wanting to be measured. He's trying to tell you how they measure. Listen
I
to the
heard
man.
how they measure,
Listen
Roger.
to the man, because they're doing measuring, and they didn't do this
And
10
what did he
years
just
ago.
say?
Well,
He just said-
wait. I think what you're saying is you're using the API to measure the school
You're using
district's
the API
performance,
to measure,
and
and
you're
here's
also saying it's not a real accurate way.
Yeah, I wouldn't use it.
And I would also
That's the point he's making.
say I agree with Wested in their research, and I came to this conclusion a long time ago, and I've been beating the drum about similar school rankings since I became county superintendent, because my research showed the same thing, and that is that you cannot compare a school in, let's say, anywhere in Merced County, almost anywhere in Merced County, to Palo Alto or Woodside or Marin County. The demographics are just so different. We know now that a third grader that comes from middle to high socioeconomic status, okay, parents making $150,000 plus, okay, will have heard 3 million words by the time they're
That's
third
right.
grade, and a student from a low socioeconomics somewhere around 500,000. Now,
That's right.
we know that in teaching literacy, hearing those words, reading to kids, having those kids, and develops not only language but also develops academic language. And that's one of the things that we really have to work on, is getting students to be able to develop academic language, to know words like academic, to know words like achievement. Those are words that are not common everyday conversation, but it's what elevates students to that those higher literacy levels. So when we talk about performance and we look at, okay, all we had was the academic performance index that California says all schools are going to be measured by, and 800 is where you had to be. And you're right when you say there are schools with high percentages of low socioeconomic, high percentages of the different subgroups. Those schools can be labeled as beating the odds. They beat the average.
Then what do they do right? Why don't we duplicate what they're doing right?
What they're doing.
No, wait a minute. Hold on, guys. We're saying that the API scores, okay, are the best we got, and this is our measuring stick.
Yeah,
and
it's a pretty good. It's a.
Okay, here you go. This is exactly what my problem is. I don't have anybody in school, okay? So I listen to people,
Right.
okay? They say, college teachers say, that the problem with the numbers is they're skewed because kids are taught to pass a test. They're not taught. That's why they're going to Common Core, so that you can figure out. It's a better measuring
Deeper
stick.
understanding.
Yes, deeper understanding. So anybody can memorize and anybody can pass a test.
Well, not anybody.
That's not fair, Robert.
Not anybody.
Well, I'll tell you what. You guys need to go to Merced College and go look at your high school graduates that go to Merced College. How many times have we heard that, Casey, from college teachers?
Over and over. The first month they teach them how to study, how to learn, how to take
how to
notes.
read a book.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and I would suggest to them that they need to take a look at the SAT scores and the number and what the percentage, because we hear this complaint from colleges and universities, and it's somewhat true. We know that the parking lot is, you can't find a parking space in the beginning of the first semester, but there's parking spaces galore come second semester because students can't handle the rigor. I would suggest to you that there's something else going on. And as county superintendent of K-12, I'll take some responsibility for the product that we're sending to those colleges, which, by the way, in Merced County ranks 6th of all counties in California as having the greatest percentage of students going on to college, enrolling in college, at least the first year. So we're getting them there. We still got a ways to go, but we're getting them there. But I would also suggest to you that you take a look at the SAT scores, which is what everybody uses as a college entrance exam. Well, SAT and ACT, but mostly SAT. Those scores over the last 20 years have been about the same. So with 30% more kids taking the test, and the average score has remained the same in language arts and mathematics. So the question I have is, if the product that's coming is still coming with the same level of knowledge as measured by the SAT, which is what colleges use, then why now are we hearing so much about these students that can't
I don't know.
They can't function. And what I would suggest to you is that there's two things happening. I think and I don't have any research to back this up. It's just something that I know that I kind of see from 40 years of experience in this field, and that is, I think that first of all, because we have so many kids, how many empty spaces are there in freshman college? We just heard UC Merced turned away 600 kids. Fresno State turned away 2,000. Merced College again is busting at the seams, and I would suggest to you that because there's so much competition for those seats, we don't have to work real hard to keep them there, because there's always somebody to take their place. And the other
you're
thing,
right there.
And it's supply and demand. And I don't think it's done consciously. I would never submit that.
Merced colleges, it's put more butts in the seats. The more butts in the seats, the more money we make. Hurrah!
Well, what I'm suggesting is that you don't have to compete. You don't have to compete to keep those seats full, because there's people standing in line to get in those seats.
And the ones that take it serious will remain in those seats, and so just your natural
the other
bleed off.
The other thing is that I think that we've just made college a lot harder. I think it's a lot harder today than it was 20 years ago.
Is that a good thing?
I think it's a good thing if it's in the right areas. And I just listened to a House committee hearing on STEM education, because I'm also very interested in promoting STEM education. And one of the things they're talking about is that we really need to take a look at how we're doing things, because right now, and one of the points they made was that we have academic subjects that all students must take in order to go to college. Why isn't computer science and computer programming one of those academic science subjects?
Yeah, the big word is coding, right? Learning how to code.
Absolutely,
so,
coding.
I don't mean to cut you off, Dr. Gomes, but unfortunately we are out of time. But boy, what a great conversation.
I think we should do this again. We could talk another show.
I don't know. I'm looking over at Tim O'Neill right now, and his face is red. And I don't know if we can get him back.
That's because the air conditioning's a little weak in here.
You're always welcome back. We encourage any school board members listening. I know that Dr. Walsh feels that she has the expertise to be on a school board and give direction. So I'd like to think that there's others out there that feel the same way, and I would encourage anybody to get a hold of us. Come on the show. We'd love to talk about this issue more. Dr. Gomes hits it right on the nose when we talk about the number of words a kid hears. It starts in the home, folks. And even if you're a second language, English is your second language, math is universal. Dos y dos is cuatro. 2 + 2 is 4. You parents at home can teach your kids math.
There's no doubt about that. It all starts at home. Anyway, Roger Wood, Tim O'Neill, Dr. Stephen Gomes, Robert Tomasetti, Casey Steed on the phone. Thank you, gentlemen. Great show, and you guys are welcome back to this forum anytime.
Anytime.